So the question is, in the absence of a biomarker to guide selection, well, again, in the majority of situations, we do not have biomarkers. So in the majority of situations, we're looking at situations in cancer where there are established protocols, established regimens. These regimens are defined by the NCI. They're defined in refereed peer-reviewed journals with clinical trials that demonstrate that this particular chemotherapy or immunotherapy or targeted therapy is effective in a particular situation, in a particular type of breast cancer, for example. So certainly our guide prior to the emergence of biomarkers and molecular diagnostics has always been and continues to be looking at peer-reviewed literature, looking at evidence for the effectiveness or relative effectiveness of particular regimens. We leave a lot of this into the hands of our clinical partners in terms of the decisions that they make as it relates to a particular one regimen versus another. We certainly have looked at NCCN guidelines as another way that a yardstick that we use, if you will. So the question is around companion and complementary diagnostic around PD-L1 expression and two particular immunotherapies in the treatment of non-small cell lung cancer. Certainly the FDA approval will be a major decision point for us, where FDA approval would naturally move toward that being an appropriate or approved therapy from the standpoint of any kind of prior authorization or evaluation for medical policy. Then beyond that, we're going to be looking at real-world evidence. So that evidence that's generated here in New Jersey or elsewhere, and so that longitudinal look at the effectiveness or relative effectiveness over time would be really the ways that we would go. Further, as we are working more deeply with our clinical partners in what are called episodes of care or bundle payment models, our clinical partners have some skin in the game, so to speak, to look with us and evaluate with us the relative effectiveness in making wise and appropriate and the most effective or value-based treatment decisions. Okay. So the question was around some cutoff point around false positives and false negatives. The short answer is no, I can't give you a particular number in that regard. Again, we're going to be looking at FDA as a key regulatory agency to guide us. We're going to be looking at NCCN as an authoritative source. We're increasingly looking at some of these value frameworks, the Drug Abacus and the ASCO value framework. So these are all guides that we use, but we don't have any specific exacting. I can't give you a number on that. So it was around first line versus second line treatment and where a companion diagnostic might be associated with a particular tumor type, with a particular cancer. Those kinds of issues where oncologists, as they have for many decades, off-label use of FDA-approved drugs, we are going to sometimes look at that on a case-by-case basis. Other times, again, in the context of cancer care, if it's not clearly inappropriate, then it's going to be the clinical judgment that's going to dictate and determine how that might be used in a similar type of cancer where there are indicators that particular pathway is relevant in kidney cancer as it is in melanoma, for example. So those kinds of decisions are getting into judgment and some of the emerging science